Hello everybody, this is Yoko's Otaku Treasures, and let me just make no, I've already checked it. Let us try and see what we can do for this. Oh yeah, the whole battle against Leonzio is in this panel. Hold on, I might need to make this bigger. There we go. Even if it's slightly, I can't see everything, I can check that in a second. What the fuck? Hey, I want to know what the conversation. What conversation was this again? Hold on, I might need to make this a little smaller again. Damn it. Okay, for those of you who are just listening, they're not, like, watching the video, I'd recommend coming back after you listen to it and just look at the manga panels that I have put up in the video itself, and if you can read this, feel free to tell me anything that I missed, because, like, it just looks weird. I can't read the damn thing because I hate the text being small, but I can't make it small and big at the same time because if I make it big, I miss some part of it. And they can't, like, scroll up to see what the rest of it says. But if I make it too small, I see the whole thing, but I can't read all of it, you know? Oh god, Hartmut. What? Hartmut. Oh dear, I think we just got a little bit of what Hartmut was talking about. Oh god. Hartmut's scary when, he's going all out. Apparently. What is it supposed to be a picture of? Faintly shining rose mine. She can't even see it herself. Yeah, Ferdinand, you won. You beat Gervasio. Yeah, because you sealed up his staff and now he can't use it. Apparently he can still use magic. He just can't amplify it, essentially. Character designs. The heck? Why are we getting, like, a skeletal thingy right here? Whatever. Oh, we get a map. Ooh, a map of Alexandria. Okay, let's see. This is Charcoal's New Duchy on the top, on the northwest. Then Dunkelberg was right over here. Hold on, I might need to make this little, hold on. Here we go. Let's see. The border gate and the friend bell tag on the top northeast. Ehrenfest to the north. Oh, Bindewald is right. Oh, that makes sense. Bindewald is right next to Ehrenfest. Let's see any others that I recognize. Not really. But then there's Alexandria Central District right over here. But yeah, here's Charcoal's New Duchy up here. Hasn't been drawn yet. Hasn't been drawn yet for Dunkelfelger over here. Okay. Let's see. Cordula, we have a problem. What problem? Oh, how it turned into Ditter. Okay. What the heck? What turned into Ditter? Oh, this is where, the shoe mill thing. The whole Schwartz and Weiss thing. Ownership thing. Okay. My brother led a force of apprentice knights to Ehrenfest dormitory. Oh god, yeah, he did. He did do that. Yeah, why would he do that? Because, he intends to confront Ehrenfest and secure your ownership of the library shoe mills. He seems to think that becoming the master of royal heirlooms will bolster your authority. Yeah, the shoe mills, the Schwartz and Weiss. Yeah, they are adorable. They are cute. If only I were the master of those dear shoe mills. Okay, so Lestalot heard this. Okay. And thought, oh, okay, I'll do this to help my sister. Yeah, Lestalot can be a bit of a brute at times, but I mean, he did try to help his sister, yet he kind of, should have asked her first before thinking, oh, I'll go get the shoe mills for her. You should have asked her, hey, would you even want to be the master of the shoe mills? Because I can go do that if you want me to. And if she said no, then we would have avoided this whole thing. And no, he did it all on his own. Oh, God. In a moment of bad timing, Rosentark seemed to have overheard your whisper. Oh, God. And then he went and told Lestalot. Still, Lestalot should have gone and asked her about this first, before going off on his own. But, sadly, can't really do anything now. I was merely speaking to myself. I wasn't exactly serious, you know. I wasn't serious about it. Yeah, you gotta go stop him. Already received his ordnance. Oh, God. Too late. Too late. This is out of my hand. Oh, God. If only I'd passed sooner. I've always had poor timing. Sort of. I don't know if I would say it's poor timing. Well, dude, it was his fault. If he had left it alone, it wouldn't have been ended up in a bad mood. Turned out Lady Rosamond would keep mastery of the shoe mills after all. Of course, yeah, because she kicked their asses. There was no risk of us stealing them, which came as a great relief. Okay. She'd think she bested Dunkelfelger at a dinner match, and was recognized by the prince as the royal heirloom's master. Truly, she is a shining example of an Archduke candidate. Oh, God. Girl, don't compare Rosamund to a shining example of a truly Archduke candidate. She is not. She's a little book gremlin who goes up on her own and messes things up without even realizing she's messing things up. And then by the time she realizes it, it's too late. Too late to go back and fix it. Oh, Rosamund. I didn't think we'd go back that fast. Or back that far, I mean. Okay. The Q&A with Miya. Okay, here are my responses to questions gathered online between May 14th and May 22nd, 2023. Okay. Question. Are the gods divided into two factions, one opposing Jurgen Schmidt's destruction and the other welcoming it? That was a good question. Or maybe it's that's some that don't want to see it destroyed and some that are indifferent to it. Whether, oh well, if it does, it does. Jurgen Schmidt functions as a part of a critically important seal on Iwigalieb. Really? Okay, that kind of makes sense. I kind of wish we could see a map of the entirety, or not really the entirety, how is it a seal? And wait a minute. If it's a seal, how is he even able to do, I guess, because winter is his domain, essentially. So how is he sealed away, and what happens if he was to, come out? That's what I would like to know. What would happen? That would be, interesting if that was to actually happen. If he was to get out, how would they seal him back, is the question. Would they have to get the others' help? Would the gods have to actually ask for the mortals' help? Because maybe they're not strong enough? Or something? That would be an interesting way to go about in this series. Let's see. If a certain person or thing suddenly became the object of mass worship in Jurgen Schmidt, would they or it become a new deity? In the vein of animism, for example. Answer. If a person was given divine power, they could ascend to the level of a god. It would be more of an accident, though, not the result of worship. Oh yeah, because I did remember them mentioning in the one of the other books, one of the more recent ones, I mean, that if Mestianora was to stabilize Rosamund herself, she would cease to be mortal. She was died by another god to stabilize her mana. She would cease to be mortal. She would be a deity, essentially. And obviously, Ferdinand didn't want that. Because one, he wanted to be with her, obviously. Two, she wouldn't be able to be near anybody at all, and she would lose everything that she essentially had aspired to get. So, yeah. Okay, cute. Question. If a deity married into the Eternal Five, would it become the Eternal Six? No, because they wouldn't become a primary god. They might not even be a subordinate. They could be an apprentice god, or perhaps something that couldn't be fully described as a god to begin with. Are they trying to allude to something here? Or is someone just asking a question to ask a question? Because that seems to be... Because the Eternal Five is the god, king and queen of the gods, the god of darkness and goddess of light, Laden Shaft, the god of fire, Flutrain, the goddess of water. Oh no, it's the king. No, it's Flutrain, Shutsaria, Laden Shaft, Iwigalieb, and Gaduld. Those are the Eternal Five. And then there's the king and queen of the gods. Let's see. Here's an interesting question. We heard of the goddess of seas, but is there a goddess of rivers or ponds? Answer. There's a goddess of rivers. She sets the boundaries between fresh and salt water. Is there even a name for it? Or has she not thought of one yet? Question. What is Wiedenmilt the goddess of? To whom is she a subordinate? Answer. She's the goddess of mercy. Before, she was a subordinate to the goddess of earth, but now she serves the goddess of light. Okay, interesting. Question. Do deities need to possess a body to descend into Jurgen Schmidt? Oh, that is a good question. Do they have their own physical forms in Jurgen Schmidt, or do they just appear? Only reason that they would think that is it because we see them in, like, the immortal plane, where we saw, the goddess of bind, the goddess of time, and all that, all that with Hannelore. So, answer, if they beam down divine power, they could manifest as an apparition of sorts, but yes, they need to possess someone to actually descend, which makes sense. Since they kind of needed to possess Handlord in order to get Rosemine to come and help. Question. Mestianora having her hair down suggests there is a distinction between adults and children even in the world of gods. Do the children have a place like the Royal Academy where they all come together to learn? Are they suggesting that there are gods that are children? Which, I mean, makes sense. I mean, Mestianora is from what we've heard, is the daughter of a Wigglyb and Geduld. But obviously they had to hide that because, well, if a Wigglyb found out, I don't know if he would either act like he does with Geduld, but to a lesser extent, or he would want to get rid of her for some reason. Why, though? I do not know. No, they're better compared to Laharls who train in their parents' places of work. Okay, another question. Apparently, because he couldn't tolerate how long Geduld remained pregnant, a Wigglyb caused all of her unborn children except Mestianora to miscarry. He couldn't tolerate how long she was pregnant. Dude! It takes a long time to create life inside you. That's why it takes 9 months for the baby to grow fully in our world. I wonder how long it would take for that Wait. He seals her away in the winter, and she ends up probably pregnant by that point. And so I think she gives birth in spring, so it's like a couple months or so? A few months? At most? Wow. Okay. But now that Mestianora has already been born, why does he still persist in trying to kill her? That is a good question. Answer, because she's a child with divine power who takes Geduld's attention away from him. Oh, okay. That guy is good lord, he's that possessive. He wants all his wife's attention on himself. Dude. If only y'all could turn him back to normal, because apparently he's only like this because the gods, the Chaos, changed his love into possession. That's the only reason he's like this. Is there a way to change it back? Because surely, if it was so easily changed from love to possession, surely there's a way to change it back, correct? I mean, they're gods, for crying out loud. Surely they can do that. And if not, then at least kind of diminish it? Sort of? If Mestianora cut ties with her mother, she wouldn't be as much of a target. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, question. How does Geduld feel about a Wigglyb? His obsessive behavior seems to have caused her a lot of grief. That is a good question. Hey, he's calmed down since a Wehrman sealed a portion of him in Jürgenschmidt. Geduld just hopes he stays that way. Oh, so it's not the complete Wigglyb that's sealed away in Jürgenschmidt. Oh, part of it. Oh, dear Lord Almighty, that would explain why everybody doesn't want Jürgenschmidt to be destroyed. Even more so, because if he went back to how he usually is, interesting. Okay, another question. When someone prays to the goddess of chaos for misfortune to befall someone, does chaos find them as well due to the nature of getting divine protection through prayer? Hey, before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. Chaos befalls the person who prays as well as their target. Okay, so essentially, chaos is kind of like karma. Where if you want someone to get the just desserts, then you're gonna get it too. Essentially. Sort of. Okay, question. Mestianora deeply resents Ferdinand, Quinta, but how does she feel about Rosemine, Ermine? Answer. She recognizes her as someone with devouring who prays often and can easily be descended into, but she doesn't have any strong feelings toward her. Her dislike for Ferdinand stems from his rudeness toward a Wehrman. Oh, I remember seeing someone mention... I didn't pay attention to this enough when I was reading it before, but when Mestianora descended into Rosemine the first time, did Mestianora mix mana with a Wehrman at some point? Because apparently she did in Rosemine's body, and that's what pissed Ferdinand off a lot. And if so, what book did she do that in, and at what point, or rather, what chapter, I should say, can you point me to, because I want to kind of check that out, because I heard that from someone. I was like, really? I don't remember that. That would explain why he was pissed off. Okay, Question. Why does Mestianora sit on a Wereman's shoulder? Is that just naturally where she lands when she descends? Is it a custom of sorts? Born from her meeting with the first Zent? I think it's such a heartwarming visual. Answer. She would sit on a Wereman's lap when she was young. Is this whole thing with Mestianora and a Wereman kind of like the thing between Rosamine and Ferdinand? Is she into him, or is that just like a fatherly thing? That she didn't have a father figure because Wiggly was nuts. When she was young, then he became a tree, so she started sitting on his shoulder instead. The only other option is his head, so don't want to do that. Question. Does Mestianora's no-kill rule cover only a certain subset of people, such as those with stabs or medals? Answer. In practice, but not by choice. Deities can't sense people who don't have a stab, so they wouldn't notice if one of them died. The length and parameters of the no-kill rule would potentially be tweaked by negotiating with the Goddess of Wisdom in the Garden of Beginnings. And we all know Ferdinand's not gonna go deal with her again, so yeah. Let's see. Question. Onwalks could already tell Mine and Quinta apart, so why did he follow Awereman's request to make Rosamine older? Because if he thought that Rosamine and Quinta were the same person, essentially, he gave her a more feminine body instead of a more masculine body. Because if he thought that she was Quinta, he would have given her a more masculine body because Quinta was male. So he already knew, he could tell them apart. A, because he was asked to. Wereman basically said, this vessel is too small, could you change that? To which Onwalks replied, you got it. Okay, that makes sense. Question, is Wereman attached to Jürgen Schmidt's foundation or something? Would he perish if the country collapsed? Answer, the foundation is his heart, as it were. Oh, really? Okay, that explains why he's so eager, not only to, obviously, because if the country collapsed, a Wiggly would get his full power back, and that would not be good. But also, that would make sense because he doesn't want to die. He would perish with Jürgen Schmidt, and the portion of a Wiggly he sealed away would be freed, and that would not be good for anybody. Especially poor Geduld. Poor lady's got enough to deal with that. Question. Gods seem to be punished for breaking the rules. Should Wereman not have been punished for trying to change the rules of the Zent race to suit his own preference? Answer. No. From his perspective, he was less trying to change the results and more trying to resolve the problem of the winner abandoning his duties and refusing to act. It was only a race to begin with because no one could reach Jürgen Schmidt's foundation, and Wereman intended to teach the victor how to get there so they could supply it with mana. Excuse me. Ferdinand, however, had merely come to leave behind the magic tool Grutashite, showing no interest at all in the foundation's location or how to reach it. If, when Ferdinand returned to the Garden of Beginnings, he had asked to learn the path to the foundation and Wereman had refused out of personal preference because he wanted Rosamine to become the Zent instead, then Wereman would indeed have been punished. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Question. I used to think of the gods personally vetted everyone who received their divine protections, but that isn't the case. Do they ever look at someone after the fact, decide they're unworthy of their protection, and take them away? Okay, that is an interesting question. Answer. For the most part, the gods don't care to look at people individually. One exception is when a couple gets divorced. Because the people involved write their names on contracts, they're much easier to identify. Violating a contract can lead to one's blessings or divine protections being taken away. Okay. Question. Ferdinand was extremely rude to Wereman. Might the gods who gave him their divine protections take them back out of displeasure? I would hope not. Answer. Divine protections given as gratitude for offered mana are only taken back under very specific circumstances, such as if the terms of a contract made with the gods are violated. And since he hasn't, they're not going to take it back unless he gives it back willingly. Like what he does when... No, he gave back the blessing, not the protection. Okay, never mind. Question. Jugeris must receive a lot of passionate prayers, be they from Daniel or from Adolphine, when she wanted to end her unfortunate marriage. Does she have a personal preference for whom she gives her protections to? Is she the goddess of divorce or something? I don't know. Answer. Most people who pray for her protection want a divorce, to leave an abusive household, or to escape a long-term toxic relationship. However, those who most naturally receive her protection work hard to better themselves and gain independence from their family for everyone's benefit. Daniel didn't want to trouble his house with the Shiksa incident and wanted to advance beyond the apprentice stage again to gain independence, which was why Jugeris gave him her protection. Okay, so question. Can someone tell me who she's the goddess of? I'd like to know. Question. If Anastasius hadn't destroyed Gervasio's medal in time, that is, before Gervasio finished supplying his country gate with mana and returned to the sovereignty, wouldn't it have violated the no-kill rule? Who would have been punished in that case? What would the punishment have been? A. Answer. Anastasius for destroying the medal. His staff and divine protections would have been confiscated. Well, it's a good thing that they did it in time. Question. How do Steret and Libeska feel second and third wives? Answer. They see them as necessary to support the main marriage. To begin with, second and third wives were taken when the first wife failed to have children. Terms like Frau, Artner, Ossis, and Arton came from their recognition of the cooperative nature of those arrangements. Somebody, want to translate that if they can? I have no clue. Question. How do the gods define the devouring? To the people of Jürgenschmidt, it's whether a commoner is born with mana. But I doubt the gods give much thought to social status. Do they notice when someone born to noble parents has it? Question. To be fair, the devouring essentially is being born with mana. So technically, don't all nobles have the devouring? They just have magic tools to regulate it. Correct? Answer. It's a way of softening Jürgenschmidt's mana, which otherwise inevitably hardens over time. When nobles of ancient houses marry within the same circles, their descendants' mana gradually loses its flexibility. So essentially, if they start inbreeding. And that's why they don't condone the whole marrying someone with the same mother, essentially. Flexible mana is easy to die, while hardened mana is more resistant, making it tougher to have children and to gain elements through prayer. Children with the devouring can be born even to noble parents. Regardless of their mana capacity, they are deemed to have no elements since their omni-elemental nature is too faint to manifest. As a result, they tend to become servants and seldom leave children of their own. Okay, Question. A very long time has passed since Jürgenschmidt was founded, yet it doesn't seem to have made much headway in the realm of technological advancements. Has the Goddess of Order restricted its progress to ensure the box garden is easy to manage? Okay. Answer. Yes. Jürgenschmidt serves as a convenient box garden for the gods, so inconvenient technological developments are made to have never happened at all. So essentially, they're trying to keep Jürgenschmidt from becoming too technologically advanced, because if they do that, they might get to the point where they don't need to do mana. Which, would be bad. Because if there's no mana in the ground, then that's not going to go well for the crops. And also, I don't know if that's going to have any effect on the whole Seal of Weegleep thing. Sorry, I was drinking the rest of my drink. Okay, question. One of the Zens from long ago came from Dunkelfelger. If the Golden Shoemill didn't reject him, I assume he wasn't too fond of Ditter. Did that make him something of a cultural outlier? Answer. Indeed, he enjoyed thinking about tactics and strategies, but took no real interest in fighting. By his Dutchy standards, he was strange in that he actually liked to learn. He wasn't fond of Ditter. Wow, okay. Question. Rosh Ralstra seems to have complained to Wehrman even after obtaining the Book of Mestanora and becoming Zent. How did she reach the Garden of Beginnings? Did she whirl on stage or go through the library? Answer. Back then, religious ceremonies were often performed in the Royal Academy's central building, and the foundation was filled to the brim. There was no need for a Wehrman to close the path to the Garden of Beginnings, so it was kept open pretty much all the time, at all times. Ralstra reached him through the library as well, of course. Okay. Question. Did the verse Zent give his name to the gods? Name swearing comes from contracts between gods, so I assume humans adopted the practice from them. Answer. He gave his name to a Wehrman, not the gods, and broke his back for him in Jürgenschmidt. Mestanora was pleased with his spirit and wrote in her book that his wisdom would serve a Wehrman further. Interesting. Okay, question. Roughly, how many generations have passed between the Grudershite becoming a magic tool and the reign of the present king? Answer. The magic tool Grudershite never reached the present king. The previous Zent who used it was the 8th. It was then passed down to Waldefred, who was technically the 9th, but the Civil War started before his coronation. Well, we all know it didn't reach the present king because he didn't have a Grudershite. That's the whole point. Question. Long ago, if dedication whirling was performed at graduation ceremonies, did the graduating students go to the Garden of Beginnings and meet a Wehrman? A. In the distant past, dedication whirling was performed not at graduation ceremonies, but in order to obtain a Stab. It was used to prove one's qualifications as a Zent candidate and to obtain an Omni-Elemental Stab. In time, the ritual for receiving divine protections came to be performed beforehand so that one could confirm in advance whether one possessed the necessary elements and had prayed enough to open the path. Incidentally, even if someone reached the Garden of Beginnings through dedication whirling in those days, they wouldn't have met a Wehrman because they wouldn't have circled the shrines. They would only have obtained an Omni-Elemental Stab. Okay, that makes sense. Question. Why did the previous Zent give the Grudershite to the second prince, not the first? A. Because of the second prince's personality, mana capacity, and excellent administrative skills. Okay, so he was more qualified for the job, essentially. Question. It seems to me that the last Ob Eisenreich, and that's essentially Ehrenfest before it became Ehrenfest, and her children were never executed even after their duchy fell and gave way to Ehrenfest. Did they keep the Eisenreich name? Answer. Yes. A noble can't rename their house, no matter how much they might want to. Nobody wanted to inherit the Eisenreich name, so its members all joined other houses through marriage or adoption. Eventually, House Eisenreich was no more. Okay, so they can't take away they can't rename their house. Okay, that makes sense. Question. In Jürgenschmidt, if an archducal family commits a crime serious enough to endanger the survival of its duchy, is it standard practice to preserve the duchy by leaving the remaining archducal family's status and the duchy's name intact? Or was this an exceptional decision made in consideration of the woman who became the last Ob Eisenreich after refusing to join the rebellion and informing the royal family? Answer. It wasn't standard practice in Jürgenschmidt. It was an exceptional decision made in consideration of her achievements. At the same time, it bought the Zent time to flush out those opposed to him and their co-conspirators and to gather evidence against them. I've got nothing to say on that. Question. Besides the lesser duchies around Dunkelfelger that were founded by former members of Dunkelfelger's archducal family, have there been any other duchies in the past that split off from the greater duchies? Were such separations more often the result of minor conflicts, or were they mutually accepted? Answer. There have been many duchies that split off from greater duchies, as well as many that were later absorbed through mergers and reorganizations. Even if they began with minor conflicts, only the Zent can redraw the borders. In that sense, all of such separations can ultimately be said to have been mutually accepted. Question. It seems to me that people in Jürgenschmidt often marry within the family, preferring to be with those of similar status. Do problems arise from those unions between close blood relatives? Answer. Yes. Mana hardens and elements become stuck. The royal family intentionally strives for such marriages for the sake of obtaining omni-elemental mana. I think they meant, well, what happens if people start inbreeding too much to the point where they're like, full siblings are marrying, you know? I think that's what they meant. And I don't think that, they're doing that with the royal family because, like you said, the mana hardens and it becomes harder to die and harder to have kids. So I don't think the royal family's going that far. Question, I assume southern Jürgenschmidt is the warmest part of the country because it has Leidenschaft's protection. But if that's the case, then shouldn't the coldest place be the sovereignty where Wegelib is? Why is the north colder? A. Geduld is the true deity of winter. A Wegelib nearly wants to keep her hidden. Really? Never mind then what I said earlier. A Wegelib's domain's not winter, it's Geduld's. Never mind. So wait a minute. Actually, yes, that makes sense because Flutrain is spring, Leidenschaft is summer, Schutzaria is fall, and Geduld is winter. So I guess a Wegelib's the odd one out on this one. A Wegelib merely wants to keep her hidden. The north is colder because a Wegelib goes to Klassenberg, which is under Geduld's protection. Oh, I feel bad for Klassenberg then. Question, it seems that Jürgenschmidt's flora is entirely reliant on mana. If a commoner tried to nourish a plant with fertilizer and that fertilizer contained no mana, would it not have an effect? Okay. Answer, Jürgenschmidt's fertilizer is made with Fey Beast and Fey Plant remains, so it does a decent job of supplying the land of mana. If a duchy is deprived of mana, fertilizer helps, but it won't resolve the problem on its own. Okay, that makes sense. Question, do the plants in Jürgenschmidt perform photosynthesis? I would assume not, since they depend on mana, unless the goddess of light's rays can stimulate growth? Answer, they don't perform photosynthesis as we understand it in Japan. Regular plants do absorb some mana from light and the air, but it pales in comparison to how much they absorb from the earth. Plants that can make their own mana are known as Fey plants. Okay. Question. Alexandria's country gate is currently closed. Yeah, because it goes to Lanzanov, and, well, we don't want that. In the event that it reopens, I trust Rosemine would want it to go somewhere other than Lanzanov. Does she already know which other countries exist? If not, does she have the means to find out? Will she get a say in which country her gate connects to? That is a good question, because if she can connect it to other countries other than Lanzanov and the other one that was connected to Eisenreach before, then surely she should be able to manipulate the country gate with her Grunterscheid to do that. I don't know if Ferdinand would let her, unless he got a say in which country it went to, and he helped her with it. But other than that, I don't think they're going to. Answer. Rosemine knows that other countries exist, but that's about it. The gate would connect to a country chosen by the gods, namely one with mana wielders seeking refuge. The gods now recognize the threat that Lanzanov's tools pose to Wehrman, so they won't ever connect to it again. Okay, makes sense. So, yeah, poor Lanzanov is fucked. Big time. Because they ain't going to be able to get any more girls to go there with mana to have kids, so... yeah, their poor ivory buildings are going to crumble. Sooner rather than later, probably. And eventually everybody's going to die out. So, yeah, Lanzanov is fucked. Question. Leonzio said that when Tolkienheid arrived in Lanzanov, his ship appeared out of thin air. Is that truly how it looks when traveling from Jürgenschmidt to another country, or would a teleportation circle form? Answer. Gates on land connect to land, and gates on the ocean connect to water. Opening a country gate in Jürgenschmidt causes a teleportation circle to appear in the destination country. When the gate closes, that circle vanishes. Tolkienheid had his own Book of Mestianora, so he built a country gate in Lanzanov. Okay, that's interesting. Question. It seems to me that duchies and provinces have their borders drawn along rivers and roads, not unlike Japanese prefectures. Would it not have been better to make the borders straight lines and to conform to the contours of the geography? Answer. Having borders that ignored the country's geography would negatively impact day-to-day life, preventing nobles from taking certain routes by carriage or boat, for example. Jürgenschmidt's borders were all straight when it was founded, but it caused so many problems across all levels of society that the Zents eventually stepped in to correct it. That makes sense. Question, how was management of work stock split between Dunkelfelger and Ahrensbach when borders couldn't be redrawn? Answer, it was decided on a province-by-province basis. Dunkelfelger's Giebs would oversee some provinces, while Ahrensbach Giebs would oversee others. Okay. Question, after learning of Rosemind's success in Ehrenfest, did any of the other duchies clean up their temple and assign a member of the archducal family to the position of High Bishop? Answer, as mentioned in the light novels, Frembaltag's archducal family now performs religious ceremonies. That makes sense because they did have to do that because they stopped supplying the mana from the chalices. They have not made one of their members High Bishop, however. Behind the scenes, they enjoy the wealth that performing religious ceremonies with more mana has brought to their land, but they would rather not be involved with the tedium of temple work such as managing priests or what have you. Well, they need to get on that because hello. Question, it was said that priests and shrine maidens can't get married. How does that square with Eglantine, a married Zent becoming High Bishop, or other such situations? Answer, the problem with blue priests and shrine maidens is that they wear colors indicating prayer for growth. So they're treated as either underage or otherwise lacking. The gods themselves don't care whether adults are married. In fact, the first ever High Bishop were Zents and Obs, and they had partners. Moving forward, a key political point will be how blue-wearing individuals are treated. The past was one thing, but at this point, blues with plentiful mana are still living in temple rooms subsidized by the Ob. Will all unwed individuals with mana be made blue priests, or will they draw from history and make youths wear blue while married adults wear a different color? That's the answer? With a question? Okay. I guess maybe she doesn't even know yet. Question, we know that blue priests and shrine maidens' robes are blue for a reason. Is the same true for gray priests and shrine maidens? Answer, there is a reason, but it isn't a religious one. The gray is to distinguish them from blue priests and to better hide dirt. Yeah, because they're the ones that do all the cleaning. Question, what would happen to the people of Jürgenschmidt if the country collapsed? Answer, they would be engulfed in white sand that aggressively sucked out their mana, turning them into white sand as well. Oh. So yeah, they're definitely the people of Lawrence never cooked. Question, what would happen to a Wehrman if Jürgenschmidt collapsed? Answer, he would disappear completely. Short, sweet, to the point. Question, now that the rules for becoming a Zent have changed, when a new Zent rises to power, what will become of their predecessor? Will the old Zent return to their home duchy with their family? Answer, as part of the handover process, the former Zent and their partner will stay in a villa on the Academy's grounds and support the country's new leader. The former Zent's children will move to other duchies for marriage or employment. Once the handover is complete, the Zent emeritus will either move in with their children or siblings or remain in the villa for the rest of their days. Okay. Question, in the current age, that is Rosemind's age, does anyone in Jürgenschmidt have divine blood? Okay, that's a good question. Answer, if you be children of Geduld who escaped illegally, not those with the power to become gods like Mestianora, then quite a few. Really? Oh, I'd love to see this! Oh, come on, I want to see her encounter some of these people. Question. In Jürgenschmidt, if a person flew straight up into the air, how far could they go? Yeah, that is a good question. Kind of, an idea of would they be able to do space travel eventually? If they were able to get technologically advanced that far, which, according to a previous question, probably would not happen. And so they would continue until they ran out of mana, at which point they would plummet. Okay. Question, can you see the Garden of Beginnings in the sky? Can you see the sky from it? Answer, you can't see it in the sky, but you can see the sky from it. Okay, so it's hidden from view in the sky, but you can see the sky, obviously. It's like an invisible barrier. Do you need approval? Question, do you need approval from a Wehrman to enter the Garden of Beginnings? A, anyone who meets the requirements can enter. There's no need to seek a Wehrman's permission. If there were, Mestianora wouldn't have had to ask Rosemind and Ferdinand to stay away from a Wehrman. They would have been expelled automatically. That said, having an invitation from a Wehrman allows one to circumvent the usual requirements. Question, what will be the impact of the library's foundation equivalent running out of mana? Answer, the underground archive would vanish, taking with it all the hints and explanations for obtaining a book of Mestianora. Reaching the country's foundational magic tool with the High Bishop's Key would also cease to be an option, meaning the route and means from before Zent Roshelstra's time would need to be used instead, but the key from that era has long since gone missing. Someone with the Book of Mestionora could research the key's shape and use, but whether they would actually find it is another story. They would have memories from the Zents who used it, but if a retainer without enough mana to have their memories recorded ever lost the box carrying it, or something of that sort, it would forever be good as gone. It's unlikely that anyone would reach the Garden of Beginnings or Jurgensmith's foundation without any hints, so the foundation would dry up and the country would collapse. So yeah, best to not let the library foundation run out of mana. Question. Why did the Zents who inherited Obsenti's magic tool, including Waldefrid, visit the library in spring? They wouldn't have the key to the Bible, and they would already know all the requisite knowledge for becoming Zents, so I doubt there was much for them to learn down there. Was it a custom passed down that had lost its original purpose? Answer. Under Schwartz and Weiss's guidance, they went there to fill the library's foundation with mana. That said, when the custom started, Zents would go there to fill the country's foundation, so you could indeed say that it lost its original purpose. Okay, good to know. Like I said, need to make sure that both the country's foundation and the library's foundation would, stay steadily supplied with mana, otherwise, bye-bye library and bye-bye country eventually. Question. We know that arch-librarians were entrusted with the key to the archive, but given how Solange talked about the spring visits, were med-librarians informed about the country's foundation? Excuse me. No. Answer. No, she didn't know anything about it. The librarians who left the guiding to Schwartz and Weiss would instruct her to stay in her office until called, and not to leave under any circumstances. Question. On a map included with Part 4, Volume 2 of the manga adaptation, the Ehrenfest dormitory had an area labeled Living Quarters for Nobles of Other Duchies. Is that where the dormitory supervisor, a sovereign noble, was meant to stay? Do the sovereign nobles who return to their respective duchies toward the very end of Part 5 also use them? A. The label on the map means exactly what it says. Nobles whose medals aren't in the possession of Ob Ehrenfest. That includes not just Ehrenfest dormitory supervisors, but also Ferdinand after he left the duchy for marriage. He would have used one of those rooms during the prologue of Part 5, Volume 11. If the nobles return to their home duchies and end up moving back to the sovereignty, I suspect they would use those rooms as well. But given how little space there is, new accommodations would be built in short order. Okay, let's see. Question. On the map of the Royal Academy included in the 7th fanbook, there are 5 sealed villas. Ooh, there's the Adultress Villa, and there's apparently 4 others. Each one, and the Adultress Villa, is close to the dormitories of a duchy with a country gate. Considering they need the Gruderscheit to be opened, could they be connected to country gates? That is a good question, because we know the Adultress Villa is technically connected to Ahrensbach, was technically connected to Ahrensbach at one point, but obviously not anymore, because they needed to send people to the country gate to go to Lonzanov. Let's see. Answer. The sealed villas were used by Obs in the distant past when there was still only one duchy per country gate. The reason those villas can't be opened without a Gruderscheit is because a Gruderscheit was used to seal them. It has nothing to do with the Civil War rendering the country gates unusable. Question. The fact that villas are called villas and not palaces tells me they aren't quite as extravagant in scale. Where did Zents live in the Royal Academy when it was their base of power? Answer. The central building. The buildings now used by students and professors were once the political center, while the Zent and their family lived in higher floors currently blocked from general access. Makes sense. Students today study in rooms that used to be offices and meeting rooms. Okay. Question. Terza means third, while Quinta means fifth. Not only does that imply the existence of a fourth, who was born between them, but it also suggests that over 15 years, 3 princesses gave birth to only a single male. Or are they counted between the 3 main houses? Answer. It changes based on the mother. Gervasio was the 3rd child of his mother, while Ferdinand was the 5th of his. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. That's what it makes sense. Okay. So essentially, he was the 3rd child, and then Ferdinand was the 5th child. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. His mother, Saradina. Question. In the Adultress Villa, did the eldest flowers go to the Royal Academy? Answer. Yes. Okay, short, sweet, and to the point. Question, I doubt any royal or obs were concerned about whether children of theirs were being raised in the adulterous villa, but if they did ask, would the people running the villa answer? Answer, no. The Zent managed the children born there and sent invitations to royals and obs, so any questions would be directed to them. Question, what are the Royal Academy's fellowship gatherings like for students who aren't Archduke candidates? Answer, their purpose is for meeting and socializing with students of the same rank, so there's one for archnobles, one for men nobles, and one for lay nobles. The eldest students take the new arrivals around and introduce them in the same order as in the Archduke candidate meetings. The other students can socialize with whomever they please, so long as they don't interfere with the introductions. Question, do students need to decide which course they want to take before they enter the Royal Academy, or do they have until their third year? Answer, given apprentice training duties, it's normal to decide before joining the academy, but people are free to change their minds before their third year. It's pretty rare, but there are cases where students whose parents ordered them to become scholars turned out to be so bad at paperwork that they switched to becoming a knight instead, or whose students who originally intended to become scholars pivot to becoming attendants so they can work primarily with people of the same sex. Makes sense. Okay, question. Ferdinand and Eustace. Both took multiple courses at the Royal Academy. How rarely does that happen? Georgine was described as having taken the Scholar course and the Archduke candidate course, so could it actually be reasonably common? Answer, it isn't rare at all for students to take particular classes from other courses that interest them. Hartman and Laisletta both took medical classes to become certified doctors. Georgine was the same. She took classes related to medicine and brewing from the Scholar course. Much less common is when someone completes a second course in its entirety to become a librarian, or when someone, Eustace, graduates as both an attendant and a scholar. Ferdinand was an exception in that he stayed at the Royal Academy outside of the academic term and used that time to complete 3 separate courses, which makes sense. Gotta blame him for wanting to stay there, considering Veronica's there. And she was horrible. Horrible to him. And pretty much a lot of other people. Okay, question. What did Anastasius do in his first year etiquette class? Did he take it alongside Archduke candidates? Answer, yes. There was always a chance he might end up leaving the royal family, and even if he didn't, he could have been invited by another royal, perhaps his brother's wife or one of his father's wives, to a tea party. Because the class was based on a tea party between royals, he was graded less harshly than the Archduke candidates. Makes sense. Question, you mentioned that male students went to the Sovereignty Temple for sex education. Was it not a security risk to welcome members of so many duchies? I don't know exactly where the Sovereign Temple is, but what if a student saw something they shouldn't have? Something they shouldn't have. Answer, the sovereignty sees no issue with it. The Archduke candidates don't bring their retainers, and the halls are lined with guards to prevent them from going anywhere they shouldn't. A small group of underage students would be physically incapable of launching a dangerous attack, and even if they somehow managed to harm the priests, those in the palace would hardly care. No noble would attempt something so stupid in the first place, lest they get their duchy in serious trouble. Okay. Question, if a student fails to graduate from the Royal Academy and their staff gets sealed, what happens to them? Answer, there's no benefit to keeping the medal of someone who failed to become a noble, so the medal is destroyed while the student is at the academy, reducing that student to a commoner. Okay. Ferdinand and Rosamund both obtained their Grutishites through unusual means. What will they spread as the official method? Answer, pray, perform religious ceremonies, and visit the small shrines of the subordinate gods, and become omni-elemental through the divine protections ritual and dedication world to open the door to the Garden of Beginnings. Then obtain an omni-elemental staff by the big white tree, circle the large shrines to get face stones of each divine color, thereby gaining the ability to see the magic circle in the sky. Perform a ritual in the farthest hall, activating the circle. Rosemund already activated it, so this step can be skipped unless the foundation loses so much mana that a wereman enters mana preservation mode again. Offer mana to the statue of Mestianora in the library and learn to produce the Book of Mestianora by chanting Grutishite. Meet the Golden Shoe Mill and obtain permission to access the Garden of Beginnings. And meet a wereman in his human form, quote-unquote, and obtain the Book of Mestianora. Oh, that's a long process, but I mean, hello, it's gotta be thorough. Question, what were the requirements to activate the big shrine's magic circles? Rosemund managed it, Ferdinand didn't, and Gervasio did in record time. Answer. One needs to perform religious ceremonies, offer up mana using the shrine in the central building. The first time Ferdinand met Ewerman, he'd brute forced his way through with an absurd amount of mana. After that, he and Gervasio were just lucky that Rosemine had already activated the circle, and Ewerman was awake and waiting for her. Question. A pillar of light forms with enough mana is given during a ceremony. When everyone prays to rejuvenate a gathering spot, does the pillar give more mana based on how much mana everyone offered? Also, if someone wants to gain an element they don't have, would it be fastest to pray at the small shrines? Good question. Answer. Indeed, the Pillar of Light gives more mana to the gods if more mana was offered. A large group of people praying makes mana flow easier and reach the gods more easily, which makes praying at the gathering spot a particularly fast way to obtain an affinity for water. If you wanted a different element, no amount of praying at the gathering spot would help. Praying at the shrines is more reliable for obtaining a specific protections. Question. When making offerings to the shrines of the primary gods, Rosemine prayed while Eglantine performed the dedication whirl. What did Ferdinand and Gervasio do? Ferdinand didn't do a shit! Didn't he? Never mind. Oh, never mind. I'm thinking of the other way, with the stupid freaking magic circle. Answer. Ferdinand offered mana as he does in the mana replenishment hall by kneeling and pouring it into the floor. Gervasio let his ring suck out his mana and gave blessings that way. Okay. Question. In its true state, the sovereignty has no land except for the Royal Academy. Where, then, does the mana from Spring Prayer held at the Sovereign Temple go? The gathering spot of each duchy? Answer. It goes to the Royal Academy and all of Jürgenschmidt. Even if one excludes the duchy's dormitories and gathering spots, the Royal Academy's grounds are vast. The sovereignty won't be able to offer as much mana as it used to after many of the priests and shrine maidens are returned to their duchies. But their efforts will supply not just the Royal Academy where Ewerman is, but also the entire country through its foundation. Each duchy manages its own gathering spot, so the sovereign priests aren't actually allowed to enter them without permission. Let's see. Question. The decision has been made for Zents to obtain the Book of Mestianora off their own backs, rather than have it handed down to them. Does that include nobles who don't go through the ceremony for obtaining the names of the supreme gods like Archduke candidates do? Answer. Anyone capable enough to become the Zent would surely be adopted by an Ob before their 3rd year and made an Archduke candidate. Anyone who lacked the talent and charisma for Obs of other duchies to want to adopt them would ultimately never become Zent anyway, so there's no point in opening the process to non-Archduke candidates. Question. Would the decision for students to once again acquire their steps at the end of the Royal Academy education not vastly increase their reliance on magic tools during class to make weapons, brew, and so on? Will the Academy, the sovereignty, provide them, the duchies, or will students need to prepare them individually? Answer. The tools will come from the academies and the palace's storerooms. It used to be the norm for students to obtain their steps during the last year, so they already have the necessary equipment. They didn't throw it all away when things started to change. A student who wants to brew outside of class can borrow from laboratories, their dorm, or even their duchy's castle. There would be a waiting list, of course, but that's nothing new, even when people with staffs need pots, scales, and other tools. Those who would rather not wait will prepare their own equipment. Question. Was there a chance that Dunkelfelger would support Gervasio? Answer. Yes. If he had filled the country's foundation, been acknowledged as the next Zent by the Sovereign Temple, and then properly inaugurated, Dunkelfelger would have supported him as the Zent sword. Question. It seems like Dunkelfelger's Obs always marry women from other duchies. Where was the previous Ob Dunkelfelger's first wife from? She survived the purge, so was she from a winning duchy? Answer. She's a branch royal. Oh, okay. Okay. Question. Kentripp's and Rosentark's mothers both seem to have come from other duchies. I thought Dunkelfelger forbade its nobles from marrying outside the duchy during the Civil War. Did their parents marry before then? Answer. That ban applied only to the archducal family, since their engagements would have a direct impact on the Civil War. Those of archnoble rank or lower could do as they pleased. Question. In Gerwanchel, the talented are adopted by the Ob so the duchy can have plenty of archduke candidates. Does that mean its archducal family is massive with an extremely complex family tree? Answer. Yes. Gerwanchel has a larger archducal family than other duchies. Well, duh, we knew that. Question. Was the name Ehrenfest chosen like how Rosemine chose Alexandria, or was it just the house name of the person assigned to be the duchy's first Ob? Answer. It was the house name of the branch royal who became the duchy's first Ob. Okay. Question, did Ehrenfest inherit Eisenreach's color? Was it chosen to match the duchy's country gate? Answer, it wasn't the same color, but yes, it was chosen to match the divine color of the country gate. Okay. Question, is the flower at the top of Alexandria's crest a species native to the duchy? If so, what is it called? Answer, it's the same flower from the Rosemine's workshop crest, understood to be Rosemine's personal crest. The design was inspired by her hairpins, not any native species. Okay. Question, after the war against Londonov, its noble troops were distributed among the duchies. What about its citizens like basic soldiers and merchants, whom I assume were just hanging around the port? I assume the soldiers will be executed, but what about the merchants? Could they become traveling merchants like those from Bozges? Answer, those who escaped capture will live out as merchants. Those who aren't so fortunate will be executed for personal vendettas. Okay. Question, prayers don't seem to reach the gods in Londonov, so is there no way for the people living there to obtain blessings or divine protections? Is prayer equally meaningless to people like Rosemine who already have divine protections? Answer, the farther one is from the Garden of Beginnings. The harder it is to make a pillar of light appear. Okay. So the further away you are from the Garden of Beginnings, the harder it is to make your pillar of light appear. Okay. It's much harder in Ehrenfest than it is at the Royal Academy, for example, and it's especially tough for those far away from Jürgenschmidt in its entirety. Those in Londonov were able to use construction magic, so their prayers reached the gods to some degree, but Gervasio had never seen the light of a blessing before, which was why he didn't recognize it. From what I can tell, those chosen to rule Londonov aren't allowed to attend the Royal Academy, even though they're given staffs. Do they still receive a noble's education? Are they taught mana compression, how to wield a staff, how to obtain divine protections, how to use an Entwickeln, and the names of the supreme gods? Answer, they don't receive a full education, but they are taught each of the points you mentioned, among other things. Okay, let's see. Question, Gervasio has multiple wives and children, which means there were multiple women with enough mana to match his. Do the people in Londonov have special means of compressing their mana or something? Answer, the people of Londonov take mana compression far more seriously than Jürgenschmidt nobles, who need only control their mana to survive. Imagine the contrast between a high school soccer club and a professional team, for example. Those in Londonov simply won't survive if they don't compress their mana, so they openly share their methods rather than try to hide them. You can compare them to Ferdinand and Rosemine, who are both desperate to survive in noble society. Okay, so they do have a lot of people with mana there. Okay. Question, in Jürgenschmidt, face stones are kept and reused like rechargeable batteries. Because Londonov imports so many, can we assume they throw theirs away once they're empty? Answer, the people of Londonov do reuse face stones, but face stones wear down with repetitive use, and magic tools start to break. Getting new face stones in Jürgenschmidt is as easy as slaying fey beasts or channeling mana into the fruit of certain fey plants. But in Londonov, the only options are to import them or to obtain them from dead mana wielders. For that reason, they consider face stones far more precious than nobles in Jürgenschmidt do. If a Londonov royal family knew Rosemine turned face stones into gold dust just to expand her excess mana, they would probably faint. Damn. Question, will the ivory buildings in Londonov collapse without a staff wielder to oversee them, or will the country simply not be able to use Entwickeln? I assume having a staff isn't necessary to refill a foundation. Answer, having a staff is necessary to cast archducal spells, but not to refill a foundation. The buildings won't collapse as long as Londonovians keep supplying mana through their replenishment hall. Gervasio entrusted the key to Londonov's foundation to the former king before going to Jürgenschmidt, so the former king will perform replenishment for the foreseeable future. Okay. So it won't go bye-bye right away. Okay. Question, how long do the people of Londonov have before their ivory buildings collapse? How long will it be before a Wiggly finds them? Before a Wiggly finds them? What? Question, the buildings won't collapse as long as they continue to be supplied with mana, but the absence of a staff wielder means they won't be able to be repaired, altered, or expanded. Londonov should be able to maintain the buildings for half a century, but the mana in the land will slowly start to fade, starting from the area around the foundation, and the lack of face stone imports means they won't be able to replace broken magic tools. If those of the Londonov royal family end up being hunted down for their face stones, the buildings will collapse much sooner. Question. Benno greeted the high priest by mentioning a blessing, and the high priest uses noble ring to bless him in response. How would the blue priests who don't have rings respond? Would they say blessings upon you or some such? Answer. Correct. They would just respond verbally. Okay. Question. How far have diptychs spread through Ehrenfest and other duchies? Answer. They have a growing presence in other duchies. Members of the planting company use them, which brings them to the attention of merchants who visit their stores. Okay. Question. What kind of alcohol were the Ahrensbach commoners drinking in Part 5, Volume 11? Answer. Mostly Weiss, as is popular in Dunkelfelder. Question. Do merchants from other duchies buy pound cake? Do they use time-stopping magic tools to preserve it? Answer. Merchants from duchies close to Ehrenfest, like Fremdeltag, Klassenburg, and Ahrensbach, stock up in autumn when food degrades more slowly before returning home. At the height of summer, they buy only portions for themselves. Commoners don't have mana, so they don't use time-stopping magic tools. Question. The 5th fan book explains how nobles in Ahrensbach and Dunkelfelder spend their summers. What about commoners? Do people often die from heat stroke? A. Considering that people still die from heat stroke and hypothermia in Japan when we have air conditioners and other modern amenities, it goes without saying that there are deaths in Jürgen Schmidt too. For safety's sake, people generally stay inside or in the shade on particularly hot days, and they do their business early in the morning or late in the evening. Question. Were funerals held for any of Effa's and Gunter's late children? Yeah, because they had at least a couple that died. Damn it. They held small ceremonies for the children and buried them in the corner of the graveyard, as is customary when a child dies before their baptism. Effa and Gunter keep locks of their hair and sometimes talk about them, but that's about it. Question. In Part 4, Volume 7, Hannelore described Dunkelfelder's tea party room as chilly. Do people in Jürgenschmidt associate blue with the cold, even though it's the divine color of summer? Answer. They associate blue with the sky that growing plants strive to reach. What evokes warmth more is winter's divine color, the red of an active fireplace. Okay. Question. Does Heifetz or anyone in a similar position feel regret or sympathy that the engagement between Ferdinand and Magdalena didn't work out? Is that why they arranged for him to marry into Ahrensbach? Answer. Not really. Ferdinand and Magdalena weren't actually engaged, and Archduke candidates have so many candidates to choose from that their families seldom care to keep track of them all. People were more concerned that because the engagement never came to be, Ferdinand continued to face abuse in Ehrenfest and was sent to the temple after coming of age. To atone for their failure, they wanted to give him the chance to flourish in a greater duchy as a proper noble. I mean, he is a proper noble in Ehrenfest at this point. Okay. Question. Georgine is the only noble we've seen return to her home duchy after marrying into another. Is it actually quite common? How often does Florencia return home, considering she's on good terms with her family? Answer. It depends on the duchy. Returning to and therefore getting involved with duchies that lost the civil war certainly isn't advised. Florencia and Constance haven't gone back home since leaving their respective duchies. At most, they exchange letters and reunite as the Archduke Conference and the Interduchy Tournament. But as sentiments change under Zet Egotine, Florencia will eventually be able to return home without fear of the consequences. Question. Commoners don't seem to retire until they're physically unable to work anymore. Is that true of nobles too? Answer. It's true of some, but most retire after handing over their duties. They don't receive pensions, rather they rely on support from their house or their successor. Question. What penal work is given to nobles found guilty of a crime? During the purge of the former Veronica faction, people were fined, executed, or made to bring magic tools. Were there any other punishments? Answer. It depends on the nature of the crime and the Oberzent who gave the verdict. Often noble criminals are forced to donate mana. Question. What would happen to a noble if their metal were destroyed while they're still in the duchy? Would they turn to ash and disappear like a commoner? Would they leave a face stone behind? Or does something completely unpredictable happen? Answer. The result is basically the same as when a noble takes fatal damage to their mana organ. They turn into a black sludge, leaving only a face stone behind. Okay. Question. We hear so much about nobles being executed during the Civil War and subsequent purges. Could they not just be kept in the Ivory Tower or just some other facility for draining their mana? The Ivory Tower isn't a facility for draining mana. It's a prison for members of the Archducal family. Anytime mana is taken, it's done using magic tools. The reason so many nobles were purged instead of simply being locked up relates closely to the events of the Civil War. Troarkol assumed the feud was entirely between the first and second prince, and that he and the fourth prince had merely been forced into their roles. That gave the fourth prince's faction an opening to kidnap and murder Troarkol's daughter. Daughter? What daughter? We never heard of this, and then again, it freaking died, so of course we didn't hear about it. He thought to spare them so they could keep contributing to the country, but they started a full-scale rebellion, which resulted in many who aided the first and fourth princes being severely punished or executed. Naturally, there are all kinds of punishments given. Question: I was shocked to learn that Grisha, who was baptized as a noble and allowed to attend the Royal Academy, could be bought and sold like cattle. Are there no human rights or other means for nobles to protect themselves from overly tyrannical heads of houses? Answer: nobles can petition their Ob if they believe someone is unfit to lead a house, which can lead to that person being replaced if the Ob agrees. In Grisha's case, her father merely arranged for her to work in the Wiltord estate, so he would never be punished. Of course. But surely the Wiltord house would have been punished for that, surely. But I doubt it. Question: Bonifatius mentioned toward the end of Part 3 that there were secret passages known only to archdukes. When an archduke who knows about them dies, wouldn't that knowledge be added to the Gruchite, making it freely available to any Zent with the Book of Mestianora? Is that why Ferdinand insisted on rebuilding the entire castle at the end of Part 5, Volume 11? Answer: for generations, Zent relied on the magic tool Gruchite. None of them had the Book of Mestianora. And because even longer had passed since anyone outside of the royal family obtained one, there were no real concerns about the information falling into the wrong hands. Only when more Zent candidates start obtaining books of Mestianora will people realize and address the risk. Okay. I'm assuming he did it because he was overly cautious, which makes sense. Question: it was said that Anastasius' retinue comprises Gelsenmeyer leadership and a strong core of Hochschlitz nobles. Is that true for Troarkol, Sigiswald, and Hildebrand too? Do the other duchies have to take issue with it? Answer: members of royalty, much like archducal family members, had their retainers largely chosen for them by their mothers. Their retinues then expand when they marry and take nobles from their partner's duchy. The custom is why Obs want their progeny to marry into the royal family. Anastasius and Sigiswald share a mother, and their retinues are very similar. Hildebrand also has scholars in attendance from Gelsenmeyer and Hochschlitz, owing to his father's influence, but his guard knights are mostly from Dunkelfelger. Troarkol's retainers mostly come from his mother's duchy, his wife's duchy, and some of the victorious duchies. There was a shuffling of personnel when he became Zent. Question: why does Hildebrand have a head attendant from Gelsenmeyer when his mother, Magdalena, is from Dunkelfelger? Were the first wife's wishes prioritized to maintain the balance of power? A. Correct. It was done to preserve the balance of power within the royal family, with the Zents and the first wife's wishes coming before Magdalena's. Question: what was the most important criterion to consider when selecting an archduke candidate's head attendant? What happens when the parents can't agree on whom to choose? Answer: perhaps the most important criterion is how well the prospective head attendant cooperates with the parents. The Ob tends not to play much of a role in child rearing. Since their successor is chosen from those being raised, the mother generally take input from the father while educating their children independently. As a result, the mother's opinion normally carries the most weight in these situations. Question: there are descriptions of female attendants and scholars going back to work after raising children, but what about knights? Are the head guard knights of archducal couples predominantly men? Female knights can return to work too, but rarely do they return to serving the archducal family. The time they spend raising their children puts them behind in their training, and growing older reduces their stamina. By the time they're ready to return to work, they're almost always deemed unfit to protect the archducal family. Some women resume their training and end up seeing success in the Knight's Order. They usually spend their time instructing minors. There's not much advice that only a mother can give. Question: it seems the female archduke candidates tend to want some of their knights and most of their attendants to be women, but women resign from their positions to get married and have children. Since courses branch during a student's third year at the Royal Academy, and women normally get engaged 4 to 6 years after that point, do female archduke candidates constantly need to cycle through female guard knights? Indeed, male guard knights are preferred in the long run, and they can accompany their female charges almost anywhere except girl-only tea parties. Female guard knights will normally be apprentices. How many more questions do we have? Jesus Christ! Woo! Sorry. Ugh. Question, it's important to have attendants of one's gender since boys and girls sleep on separate floors of the Royal Academy. But can nobles have attendants of the opposite gender otherwise? Rosemine has both male and female attendants in the temple, so surely it's okay to have a few. Answer, married men sometimes take a female attendant or two so they have someone who can communicate with their wife and enter her bedroom. And at times, both men and women take their extramarital partners as attendants. There's a strong tendency to view attendants of the opposite gender as mistresses or what have you, so unmarried noblewomen never take male attendants. An attendant's duty is to take care of the everyday needs of their lord or lady, but if their charge is of the opposite gender, they can't bathe them, change their clothes, always join them at tea parties, and so forth. In most cases, it would end up causing more trouble than it's worth. Yes, Rosemine has male attendants in the temple, but that's another story. Using magic tools is out of the question, and she can't entrust physical labor to the girls. They also do work that would otherwise be done by scholars in the castle. Fran and Zom do paperwork and assist her with her high bishop duties, while Gil and Fritz manage the workshop. Question, from the perspective of a noble, what's the difference between sending a child to the temple and putting them to work as a servant, using magic tools and such? Answer, children sent to the temple are known to other houses as noble progeny, when those put to work as servants are hidden from the public and considered commoners. Shiksu was in the temple as an apprentice blue priest from House Dalduf, which is why he could return to noble society and into the Royal Academy under temporary special conditions. Servants aren't considered scions of a noble house, and they wouldn't be allowed to attend the Royal Academy regardless of the circumstances and whether they had mana. In that regard, the difference comes in terms of treatment. Children sent to the temple are treated better than servants. Question, how are servants perceived within their households? Answer, they are treated not as members of the family, but as, well, servants. They have lower status than those they serve and noble attendants, but more than hired commoner servants. Because they would find it hard to survive outside their household, many are forced to accept being treated more or less like slaves. Those related to geese by blood are sometimes entrusted with their estates during winter socializing, which is a big responsibility. If a laid noble house can't afford to pay for an attendant, its servant can also be tasked with attendant duties. Question, it was said that when a couple who married the ancient way separates, they find it hard to get blessings from the supreme gods. Does this ever lead to them losing light or darkness as elements? I expect Sigiswald was omni-elemental when he married Adolphine, but lost an element after their divorce. Answer, divorce always makes it harder to get blessings from the supreme god since it constitutes breaking a contract made when the couple got married. It doesn't take away existing blessings, though. Question, will anything be added to Rosemine's name to identify her as the first Ob of Alexandria? No. Answer, no. Her full name will conform to the usual name, Ob, and duchy format. Troarcol and Sigiswald were given house names because they didn't have one when they were royalty. Rosemine won't void her adoption by Sylvester, so her full name will either end up being rather long. Rosemine Toctor Linkbird Adoti Ehrenfest Ob Alexandria. Damn, she is going to have a long name. Question, do the archducal families of lesser duchies that gained independence continue to use their original house names? Answer, the first generation keeps it, but their children take the names of the duchy instead. Question, if a noble who follows their lord or lady to another duchy marries, can they revive their house? Answer, no. Any house they formed would simply be considered a branch of the main house. Question, when establishing a house, is it necessary to change one's name? Answer, you would need to include an or in your name to indicate you're being the start of a new house. Question, I assume all the nobles names sworn to Rosemine are moving to Alexandria. Will they be allowed to form new houses or marry with Rosemine's permission? Answer, they won't start houses, but they can marry with Rosemine's permission. Roderick and Grisho just need to come of age first. The exceptions are Matthias and Lorenz. Because of their history at Ehrenfest, they should have been executed for guilt by association. Sylvester would also need to consider the matter before the decision of whether they can marry can be made. Question, under what circumstances can a woman become the head of house? Would she need to be a Geeb? Could she rise to the position without a husband? Answer, in general, one only becomes the head of a household after marriage. If someone urgently needs to inherit the position after coming of age, an engagement will do, but someone without even a potential partner would never be considered. That's true for both men and women. As long as she's an adult and engaged, a woman is just as able to be as a man to become the head of the household. Question. In the 7th fan book, it was said to be particularly tough for women to become obs. Why consider them at all, then? Answer. Because a woman becoming an ob can be important for preserving a bloodline or a noble house. It wouldn't make sense to obsess over male successors to the detriment of one's progeny. Question. Channeling mana into another person in the bedroom seems to cause both rebound and pain. Does having a greater mana capacity result in more pain and vice versa? Does it hurt when one person has mana and the other person doesn't? Okay, we're getting a little bit of risque territory. Answer. The amount of pain depends on the difference in their capacities, but it's shared equally between the two people involved. If they can no longer sense each other's mana, there won't be any pain at all, but they also won't be able to have children. Question. When people from different duchies get engaged, in which duchy are the color mixing ceremonies and engagement ceremonies held? Did Hartman and Clarissa formerly have either? Answer. Generally, the fathers would decide the location of the engagement ceremony, and the color mixing would be held somewhere convenient, such as the interduchy tournament or the Archduke Conference. If the people getting engaged are due to see each other again at the Royal Academy in a year's time, they might exchange face stones. Or face stones then. If not, the person not marrying into another family will visit the person who is, like when Detlind went to Ehrenfest. In Hartman and Clarissa's case, they color mixed during the interduchy tournament and exchanged engagement face stones. The plan had originally been for Hartman and his family to travel to Dunkelfelger for a debut-style engagement ceremony, but that was cancelled when Clarissa charged into Ehrenfest of her own accord. When her parents frantically arrived with her belongings and apologized, there was something of an engagement ceremony to introduce her to the family. Question. Female students are taught sex education by their family's attendants, not during classes at the Royal Academy, right? Are they taught before they start school, after they develop mana sensing, or at some other point? A. It depends on the tutor. Most teach it right before their student attends the Royal Academy, or after they develop mana sensing. Let's see. Question. During the Trombe rescue, Mine, an apprentice shrine maiden at the time, felt considerable pain when Ferdinand channeled mana into her. Are there genuine risks involved with absorbing foreign mana? If a pregnant woman absorbed too much, could it result in a miscarriage? Answer. At first, the mother's body would reject the mana, keeping the baby safe. But if the foreign mana pushed through the rebound, it would indeed cause a miscarriage. Question. Is there a term among nobles for women who give birth later than others? At a dangerously old age, for example. Answer. They don't have a term for it, but it is considered dangerous to have one's first child past the age of 30. That said, having mana that's compatible with your partner is more important than age. Question. If a first and second wife were to die in quick succession, allowing a third wife like Georgine to take over as first wife, would it be acceptable for the husband to take a new second or third wife? Answer. If he had only one surviving wife, he would take another, but that's all. If he lost all his wives, he could marry 2 more. Question. Why are girls like Gracia raised to be mistresses? Would it not be better for the reputation of both houses if they were taken as third wives instead? Answer. Men seek mistresses when they already have a third wife, but want more women, or when they want someone who can't complain no matter how they treat her. Families raise girls as mistresses when they want to form connections without having to pay for a formal wedding or care for their children. Feel even more bad for Gracia now. Question. Did Ehrenfest end up morally loose in sexual matters as a result of being ruled by a faction consisting largely of men nobles who treated those beneath them harshly? Huh? Answer. That looseness was only true for some people. I don't think you could tar all of Ehrenfest with the same brush. There are lusty commoners as well as nobles, and some lies gangs behave the same way as those of the former Veronica faction. There are some nobles who perform their duties excellently despite being sexually depraved. However, Gracia being sold by her father is something of a special case. Oh boy. Not really what you want to hear when you're a special case. Not in that context. No. That's a big no for me. Nobles in Jürgenschmidt seem to care deeply about their reputation. What kind of treatment could a woman expect to face if she ended up with a less than desirable reputation? Answer. She would find it harder to have a normal marriage, for one thing. A noble woman unable to carry out her duty of conducting 2 noble houses through marriage would end up a mistress at best, but would more likely be sold off by her family under the guise of prioritizing work. Of course! Freaking hell. Feel bad for all those involved. Excuse me. Sorry, I was trying to adjust how I was sitting. Question. Feline was baptized as her late mother's daughter after having her mana checked. Could she also have been compared to her father? Answer. Yes. Ferdinand's mana was compared to his father's before he was baptized as a member of Ehrenfest's archducal family. Question. Could two nobles who aren't omni-elemental produce an omni-elemental child? Answer. Yes, but it's exceptionally rare in modern-day Jürgenschmidt. Question. Before she became Rosemine, Mind clearly saw mana flow into staffs and weapons. Is it possible to observe mana without having developed mana sensing? Answer. Yes. Nobles can observe mana as it moves through them, and as it's expelled into the world. Mana compression is the act of controlling the mana within oneself, and children start studying it before they've even developed mana sensing. You could consider mana sensing as something of a sixth sense for telling whether you're able to have children with someone and whether their mana capacity matches yours. Question. Rosemine became omni-elemental after Ferdinand died her. I assume that happened because she had the mark of Ewigelib, but could even a normal devouring child obtain an omni-elemental staff if they were died with omni-elemental mana? Answer. It happened because her mana organ was died. That wouldn't be the case for a normal devouring child, so they wouldn't gain access to the Garden of Beginnings. Question. Ferdinand said it wasn't hard to dye someone beautifully. What did he mean by that? Are there consequences for dyeing someone in a way that isn't? What the fuck kind of question is that? Actually, what did Ferdinand mean by that? Question. Is the same as fully dyeing a stone. He was simply saying that given her attributes, Rosemine could easily be dyed, and that if she didn't need to be dyed fully. Outside of those with the mark of Ewigelib, mana usually influences both parties rather than just the one. Question. Copy and paste seemed not to cause any resistance, probably because Rosemine and Ferdinand had the same mana even without a synchronization potion. Still, did Ferdinand feel anything? Yes, he did. Because he was getting uncomfortable with it. Answer. Rosemine's mana had been partially influenced by Sigiswald's courtship magic tool, so Ferdinand felt a small rebound. Oh yeah, because she wore that thing until it broke. Question. Rosemine cast a large-scale spell to use up her divine mana. Could she not have returned the blessing using Verfurimer's staff? Answer. Verfurimer's staff is used largely for quelling excitement. The ceremony steals blessings from knights high on battle and calms them down. Furthermore, the blessings are given in an entirely different way. Blessings given to others by praying for them is like coating someone with a layer of dust. You can be coated in all kinds of dust without it negatively impacting your body, and you can wash it off with water. The divine mana Ewerman called for to be used in filling the foundation was like a torrent of different kinds of water forced into one's body. It mixed together in weird ways that affected her organs, and it couldn't simply be wiped off. Okay, so it wasn't that easy. Question. If you're name sworn to someone, would you feel resistance when their mana is channeled into you? Answer. Of course. Your lord or lady simply binds your body. The name swearing process doesn't change the mana inside of you. Question. Despite dying Arensbach's foundation, Ferdinand was deemed the odd because Rosemine's mana was dyed by the goddess. I thought he would have been enveloped by her mana due to the name swearing. Can magic tools distinguish this? Answer. Name swearing impacts only the mana around someone. It doesn't change their internal mana. Question. How big is a box for namestones? Answer. Big enough to fit in Rosemine's palm. So not that big. Because I'm assuming her palm is a lot smaller than mine. Question. Originally, Rosemine didn't seem to recognize the box containing Ferdinand's namestone. Why is that? Answer. The size of a namestone varies from person to person. The box is always white, but there is no uniform design. Question. How much of an endeavor will it be to re-dye Jürgenschmidt's foundation now that it has been dyed with divine mana? Would it be hard for Eglantine to dye it over the course of her tenure as Zent? Answer. It won't be too bad. Rosemine's mana organ was dyed with divine mana. Re-dyeing it was much harder than re-dyeing a foundation filled with Rosemine's mana, whether she was under divine influence or not. Eglantine has incredibly inflexible mana from being a member of an ancient royal house, so she finds Rosemine's mana pliable and trivial to dye. Had Ferdinand been dyed with divine mana before filling the foundation, it would have been nightmarish for her since he's also from an ancient house. Question. I thought only the Ob could activate teleportation circles, but Rosemine said in Part 5, Volume 10, That any member of the Archducal family registered to the Mana Replenishment Hall can activate them. What am I missing? And so the door to the teleportation hall can't be opened without the key to the foundation, which the Ob normally holds onto. Once an Ob passes away, any member of their family with the key can open the teleportation hall and activate the teleporter even before they re-dyed the foundation. That's why Rosemind thinks anyone in the Archducal family can use it. To everyone else, the key to the foundation is proof that someone's an Ob, or the idea that only the Ob can activate teleportation circles is true. Or so that they can't. That's true. They wouldn't expect Ferdinand to have it. Most assume Rosemind wouldn't even be able to use the key since they see her as either a commoner with the Devouring or Karlstadt's daughter. That's why people suspect Ferdinand of bringing Winter early and dying her. They're not wrong, but they aren't exactly right either. He did dye her, just not in the way they think. Oh my god. I will say this. I said this before last time, but I want you to get to the point where they can actually have kids. Because I think it will be adorable. I think you'll be... Their parenting styles probably differ quite a bit. She would try to get them, obviously, into books. He would be strict with them on their teachings. Oh my god, I can't wait for that. If you ever give it to us, please. Question, it was said that the Ob has to personally activate teleportation circles that cross duchy borders, but Arensbach didn't have an Ob during Rosemind's third year at the Royal Academy. How did Arensbach's students make it to the Academy? Answer, quite mundanely. Detland activated the circle with the key to the foundation. She was unmarried, and her mana hadn't been influenced by anyone else's, so her mana was similar to that of the deceased Ob. Question, what does the barrier leading to the foundation of a Gieb estate check for to determine whether someone is a member of the owner's family? A, the similarity of their mana. Question, as the Zent's husband, Anastasius needs to circle the shrines and become omni-elemental even though he doesn't have the Grucheshite. Are there duties expected of the Zent that require omni-elemental mana? I assume the magic tool Grucheshite allowed Zents of the past to take the throne without omni-elemental mana, so why does Anastasius need it? Indeed, the Grucheshite magic tool was made specifically so that people without all the elements could still become Zent. Anastasius doesn't have the tool, so he needs to become omni-elemental. Question, Anastasius only needs to be omni-elemental for the sake of helping the Zent. Since he already had all the elements from the subordinate gods, all that remains for him is to get the protection of the primary gods. What will that require? Will he need to circle the small shrines, perform the protection ceremony, circle the large shrines, offer mana to the library statues of Mestianora? Answer, Anastasius wasn't omni-elemental as of Part 5, Volume 11. He wasn't omni-elemental when he obtained his stab, so he couldn't enter the large shrines as Hildebrand could. He's expected to circle the small shrines and regain his divine protections. Question, channeling mana directly into a phase stone turns into gold dust, so why does channeling mana into a pot cause phase stones to melt? Answer, because they're being brewed in the pot. Question, could one of Rosemind's phase stones be used for an omni-elemental brew? Answer, yes. Question, Professor Solange used Rosemind's phase stones to supply Schwartz and Weiss with mana. Does that mean using someone else's phase stone offers their mana, not yours? Answer, that's right. It's like how when brewing, you use your mana to push out impure mixed mana from ingredients. If someone pushes Rosemind's mana out of a phase stone, it's the same as supplying her mana. Question, how do nobles and mana wielders perceive physical enhancement magic? Answer, they sometimes use it unconsciously to wield manic strength in emergency situations, but they don't think it's worth training to use it for extended periods of time. It isn't all that useful in their day-to-day lives, and there are magic tools they can use instead to improve their eyesight, help them lift heavy things, or slay babies. It would take years of practice for someone to master physical enhancement magic to the point that they wouldn't need magic tools anymore. And the mana cost would be enormous. It helps knights fight more efficiently, but it also speeds up the rate at which they run out of mana, so it's rarely used outside of classes at the Royal Academy. It was very valuable during the Civil War when ambushes could come at any moment, so it's more common for older nobles to know the techniques than younger ones. Question, when someone dies and their memories are added to the Book of Mestianora, is every existing Book of Mestianora updated at once? Answer, there's an optional ceremony one can perform in the Garden of Beginnings to update one's book. However, once it's complete, a Zent has all the information they need to carry out their duties. There's no reason for them to update it again. Not to mention the new memories wouldn't be added until a Mestianora finished editing them. The time frame for updates happens on a divine timeline, not a mortal one. Question. Ferdinand and Gervasio obtained their books of Mestianora at different times. If Gervasio had completed his, would he have gained knowledge that Ferdinand didn't have? We know Rosamund got the incomplete parts of Ferdinand's book. Did she get the updates? Answer. If they had gotten the full book, both Gervasio and Ferdinand would have received a newer version. Question. What are the newest memories in Rosamund Ferdinand's and Gervasio's book of Mestianora? Answer. Probably memories from the Civil War. I haven't named them, so I can't really specify, but the person would probably be a royal who died during the Civil War, a branch royal executed during the Purge, or the abb of a top-ranking duchy. Nobody with enough mana to be recorded in the Book of Mestianora has died since. Question. When the Zent race began, Ferdinand and Gervasio drew teleportation circles in the air with their books of Mestianora. How were they able to do that without being able to form multiple stabs? Answer. The Book of Mestianora comes with a pen. Ferdinand has written quite a lot in his. Question. We know that the elements of a person's stab depend on which elements they had when they acquired it. What would happen if a student with an aptitude for 6 elements prayed a lot to get their final element? Life from a weak leaves subordinates before going to get their stab. Affinities are important, as you said, but the degree in which one's affinities have improved through prayer changes things. If a student in this example had get enough from those subordinate gods that light formed, they could get the protection from a primary god. They could then go to the Garden of Beginnings to get an omni-elemental stab. In short, it doesn't matter how much a person prays and develops their affinities if they obtain their stab without first performing the ceremony to obtain divine protections. Their stab wouldn't have the updated values and would simply match their original aptitudes. That's why under the old curriculum, the ceremony was performed just before students came of age and obtained their stabs. Incidentally, Rosamund already had the divine protection of all the primary gods because she had Ferdinand's mana copied into her, so she was completely omni-elemental even before she performed the ceremony for the first time. Question. This is impossible for various reasons, but if someone found their divine will, left without taking it, then improved their mana capacity and affinities and returned, would their divine will have moved? Answer. If that person performed the divine protections ceremony and had more elements, then yes, their divine will would have moved. Question. Can someone who obtained their stab outside the Garden of Beginnings circle the shrines, improve their mana, and then go to the Garden of Beginnings to get a better one? Answer. No. Yeah, they can't get a new one, sadly. They gotta keep the old one no matter what. Question. It was said that the darkness spell can be cast only on stab weaponry, but what about a stab shield? Would it absorb mana like Dunkelfelger's treasure did? Answer. It can be cast on shields, but it would only let you absorb as much mana in one blow as your mana capacity would allow. It wouldn't be as impressive as Dunkelfelger's treasure. Question. Why didn't the Sovereign Knights use darkness weaponry for the battle in the auditorium? The royal family forbade its use, but why wouldn't the knights use it anyway when the fate of the entire country was at stake? Answer. Normally darkness weaponry is for darkness babies, not humans, and you can use the darkness weaponry only once per day. Roblet knew from the Bible inquiry that Ferdinand could use both the spell and the prayer for darkness weaponry, and it hardly seemed logical to use darkness spells against Ferdinand and Rosamund when Silvercloth was already blocking mana attacks. Question. Between the divine instruments in the temple and the divine instruments formed by stabs, which is the real deal? I was wondering if the divine instruments in the temple are just there for people who can't form their own, like the magic tool Grudgestite. Answer. The divine instruments in temples are magic tools that exist as a way to obtain the magic circles necessary to create instruments with one stab. Neither is the real deal, though. The ones wielded by the gods are the originals. Okay, good to know. Question. If someone had multiple stabs, could they make 2 of the same divine instrument? Answer. Yes, but they would need to cast a spell or say the prayer for each one. Question. Does the magic circle gained from offering mana to the divine instruments come to mind every time you offer mana, even after you have obtained it in full? Answer. Yes. Okay. Question. Old Workstock doesn't have an ob, so how was the magic circle in its dormitory used to move the Tarish Befallens? Did Georgine temporarily dye Old Workstock's foundation? Answer. Close. Georgine's loyal daughter Alstead and her husband Blasius dyed the foundation. She used it to test the High Bishop's Bible and key. Question. For the large-scale spell to cover the entire duchy, its magic circle would need to overlap several border gates at once. Did they use multiple circles to prevent this? Or did the spell also impact neighboring duchies? Answer: the spell impacted the duchy through means of the foundation. The circle distorted along its borders so as to not affect neighboring duchies. Question: in Part 5, Volume 10, it was written that Rosamund saw the magic circle above the Royal Academy even at night. Why didn't it disappear? Could Ferdinand see it too? Answer: because it was the Royal Academy circle, not Rosamund's. One gains the ability to see it after circling the large shrines and completing one's divinely colored face stone, and it remains visible even when activated. Ferdinand also sees it. Question: why was the omni-elemental blessing Rosamund gave in the final scene of Part 4, Volume 9 on the last page of the Bible, and why was it known only to high bishops? What was the purpose of the circle? Answer: it's a magic circle that takes a Zent's prayer meant to be given to all of Jurgenschmidt and given it to someone precious to the caster. Oh! Okay. Makes sense. It was something like a reward for ancient Zent candidates who inherited the Bible and after plenty of hard work gained all elements in a sufficient mana capacity. It's at the end so it can be seen only by owners of the Bible who have fulfilled these conditions. Question: in the farewell scene at the end of Part 4, Volume 9, why didn't Ferdinand recognize the spell? Was it not in his Book of Mestionora? Answer: the spell was meant to be a reward, so the Goddess of Wisdom taught it to the first Zent. It isn't in the Book of Mestionora. But still, surely he would be able to have seen it in the Bible at some point. Right? Question: according to the fisherman in Part 5, Volume 11, the ocean started getting murkier after the silver ships came. Was that because the silver ships absorbed mana from the water to use as fuel? Answer: that's right. The ships absorb mana when transitioning from silver to black. They also drain mana from the country's gate's teleportation circle. In doing that, they feign using mana while transporting the silver material. Okay. Question: if Lanzanov's black ships use the country's gate's mana when teleporting, are they worsening Jurgenschmidt's mana crisis? Have the weremen and the gods sensed them? Answer: their actions are a contributing factor, but since the material their ships are made from has no mana, the gods can't sense it. Question: I assume silver capes can't be teleported or what have you. How did those of Lanzanov get them to the Royal Academy then? Answer: just like Lanzanov's ships, they absorb mana from the environment to feign having mana. They are put in a magic toolbox, the fruit of Georgine and Grossum's research, which was used when Georgine and Grossum fled their respective nobles' quarter. Question: silver needles that pierce mana-made armor, silver cloth that blocks mana attacks, poison to instantly kill those with mana. Developing these inventions must have required a lot of trial and error, but Lanzanov doesn't have many nobles. How is this technological revolution coming about then? Is it being led by Lanzanov's original population or by its nobility? Answer: the driving force of the technological revolution isn't one particular group, so the technologies themselves come from a variety of sources. Some were developed to be used in the Adulta Sevilla, some were developed by revolutionaries to weaken Lanzanov's royal family, some were developed by Georgine and Grossum after they bought the materials from Lanzanov merchants. Question: would Lanzanov's instant death poison work on commoners too? Answer: it would work on commoners with plenty of mana, such as those with the devouring, but not on commoners with barely any. However, since all plants and creatures in Jurgenschmidt contain mana to some capacity, it could still cause health problems such as forming tiny clumps inside their bodies. Because the complications would vary from person to person, it could result in early mysterious deaths. Question: around the time Georgine and Detland were staying in Ehrenfest, an emergency notice arrived at the border gate. I understand why they couldn't use the water mirror, but couldn't they have sent a magic tool letter through the border gate instead? Was there a reason they opted not to? Answer: they could have sent a magic tool letter through the border gate. Ordinances travel much faster though, so they're preferable in emergencies when it doesn't matter who on the receiving end might hear the message. They would send an ordinance to the Ehrensbach Knight at the border gate, have them share the message with the Ehrenfest Knights, then have the Ehrenfest Knights send an ordinance to Georgine and Ehrenfest. In this case, because Georgine was pulling the strings, an ordinance was preferable so that the people of Ehrenfest would definitely hear that Ob Ehrensbach was in poor health. Question: can you cancel the playback of an ordinance? I find myself worrying how many people must have died and how many families must have been ruined because an inconvenient ordinance arrived at the wrong time. You can't. Even convenient tools have their drawbacks. If receiving an ordinance would be inconvenient, one needs to take precautions in advance. Question: there seems to be scenes where rather lengthy messages are spoken into ordinances. Is there a limit to how much one can relay? Answer, you can keep speaking into it for as long as your mana lasts. Whether the recipient would actually listen to such a long message, however, is another matter. Question, roughly how many charms was Rosemind wearing before she departed for the battle in the Sovereignty? I feel she had far fewer in the conflict that followed. How many would other people, the knights there, for example, normally wear? Answer, around 30 to 40? Damn! Ferdinand, where did you get all those damn tools and where did they go? Rosemind had no combat training, so she needed a wide variety of them. She had some to protect her against mana attacks, some to protect against physical attacks, and some for mana absorption. Some were single-use, while others could be replenished with mana and reused. An ordinary knight would wear about 3 to 5, and they would treat them more as lifelines for emergencies. Rosemind, meanwhile, was covered in charms made by those determined to ensure no harm came to her under any circumstances. Where did they all go? If she had about 30 to 40 of them, where did they all go? Because surely her attendants had to put some in some very awkward places when they were getting her dressed. Good Lord, Ferdinand. I know you wanted to keep her safe, but Jesus Christ. Question, Ferdinand and Rosemind usually wear protective charms, but do they take them off when bathing or sleeping? Answer, they remove some of them, but not all. They always keep 2 or 3 on. I mean, because yeah, you never know if someone might attack you in your sleep. Question, there seems to be magic tools for keeping high beasts fixed in place, but how long can one be maintained without its owner nearby? If the owner died, would the high beast disappear as well? Answer, that depends on how much mana has been poured into the magic tool. If the owner dies, the high beast would turn back into a face stone. Question, if someone pours all their mana into a high beast, how fast would it be in Earth terms? I assume it depends on how much mana the person has, but I'm curious about how fast Bonifatius was when he went full speed during that celebratory feast. Answer, in Bonifatius' case at the time, I feel he was easily exceeding the legal speed limit on a highway. 150 kilometers per hour, maybe. How fast is that in, miles per hour? I'd love to know. Oh, damn, I gotta be careful. Question, in her divine avatar state, Rosemind turned face stones into gold dust simply by touching them, yet she still managed to form a high beast with a rainbow face stone. Are rainbow face stones just that strong? Answer, compared to face stones of a single element, rainbow face stones specialize in absorbing multiple elements at once. However, that doesn't mean just any rainbow face stone would keep its shape. Ferdinand carefully selected the best rainbow face stones, one with the capacity and elements allowance to withstand divine mana, then processed them into several high beast face stones, which he told Rosemind to match together to increase their capacity even more. It took a great deal of effort and ingenuity to make her high beast become face stones so strong. Question, why didn't Rosemind's high beast face stone or the charms that Ferdinand made for her turn to gold dust when she was overflowing with divine mana? Answer, the face stone for Rainbow Leslie was made so that it could withstand such mana, and Rosemind's hair ornaments was made with a high-quality Rainbow face stone to begin with. The charms had magic circles on them that prevented deterioration, and Rosemind never touched them directly, which would have put them at most at risk. Instead, whenever she wanted to put them on or remove them, her attendants did it for her. If she had taken one in her hand, it would have been turned to gold dust immediately, but it would have simply been a matter of time. It wouldn't have turned to gold dust immediately, but it would simply have been a matter of time. Question, does the larger version of Leslie usually have more legs as seen in one of the end of Volume 4 panel manga? Answer, more legs would make it more stable, so I think so. Question, now that Rosemind had decided to put shoe mills on Alexandria's crest, would she need to change her high beast to match? Or is that not a requirement despite her being the Ob? No, she won't have to change her high beast. Letizia and any future children of the Archduke will probably try to make their shoe mills, but I doubt either Rosemind or Ferdinand will change their current high beasts. Question, only the Archducal family is supposed to be able to use high beasts based on whatever animal is on their duchy's crest. Will nobles who already use shoe mills as high beasts be forced to change them? Answer, as long as the shoe mills don't fully match the ones on Alexandria's crest, that is, as long as they don't have face stones on their foreheads, they should be fine. Question, when Illegalleap's sword was used to freeze Lonzon off ships, what factors helped draw out its true power? Was it rescuing kidnapped women, protecting Rosemind and the other women on the battlefield? The fact that 2 of the 4 users had fiancés. If that last point is relevant, does the strength of their relationship help? Answer, those were all important factors. If the sword is used to protect one's wife or fiancé, then the nature of their relationship, or rather the strength of the wielder's emotions, has an impact. Ooh, I wonder what would happen if Ferdinand or Rosemind were to use that damn sword. Oh, I felt God's help whoever was on the receiving end of that. Question, when Rosemine was performing Spring Prayer to use up her excess mana, what would have happened if she had dropped the chalice from her high beast? Would it have shattered? Would it be possible to catch a falling chalice with a band of light, like hooking a fish? Answer, it wouldn't break. The ground would cave in beneath it. But yes, you could catch it with a band of light. Okay. Question, if a chalice full of mana was accidentally dropped, would the mana spill out? If someone turned one upside down, would the mana stay inside as long as there were no intention to pour it out? Answer, mana wouldn't come out unless the person using the chalice wanted it to. Question, could someone wearing the God of Darkness's cape pass through Susaria's shield? Answer, that depends on the mana capacity of those involved. Hartman couldn't pass through Rosemine's shield, but Rosemine could pass through his. Okay, good to know. Okay, hold on, guys. I might have to... not quite yet. Question, why did Ferdinand warn Rosemine that the God of Darkness's cape should only be used as a last resort? Was it because she might be suspected of being a mana thief? Answer, suspected. It absorbs mana from the other people and even the land itself, which is mana theft in the most literal sense. If you look at the consequences of old workstock schemes using chalices to steal from the earth, you can see just how dangerous the cape is. It isn't something to use lightly. Okay, good to know. Sorry, I ordered food earlier today, and I didn't think I was going to be doing this long. And it's already on its way. In her second year, Rosemine offered mana to the statue of Mestianora. If she had poured it in more mana at the time, could she have obtained the shape of the Gujashite then and there? What would have happened next? Answer, Rosemine could have obtained it since she's omni-elemental and already had a stab, but having an empty shell wouldn't have enabled her to perform the duties of a Zent. She would have ended up investigating with the royal family how to fill it, which would have led to circling the shrines. The royal family's cohesive power would have been far stronger at that point in the story, and a wedge would inevitably have been driven between Rosemine and Ferdinand, as he would have confronted her and said, "Do not say that you do not wish to be the Zent." Rosemine would have been confined to a sovereign villa and forced into obtaining the Book of Mestianora. Irwame would instruct her to kill Quinta to finish her book, and although she would refuse, it would ultimately be completed when Ferdinand fell into those in Arensbach. From that point on, it would have been considered too dangerous to let her meet with anyone from Ehrenfest, and she would never have seen her lower city family again. You could call it the shut-in Shadow Zent ending. Okay. Question, if someone kept offering mana to the statue of Mestianora's divine instrument, could they obtain a blank and empty Bible even without having many elements? How does Mestianora's divine instrument differ from those of the primary gods? Answer, without enough elements, you can't obtain even a blank empty book. The primary god's instruments are meant to help in gaining new elements, whereas the goddess of wisdom exists for people who already have them all. Question, rejuvenation potions are equally effective no matter who makes or drinks them, but is that also true of synchronization potions? I thought that a synchronization potion only worked on the mana of the person who made it, that if you gave someone a synchronization potion made by someone else, it wouldn't lower their resistance to your own mana. Answer, I think your original impression was correct. A synchronization potion is used to make it easier for your own mana to pass into the other person. Nobles give one they made themselves to their partner before performing knightly duties. Okay, so this is before. That said, synchronization potions can be used interchangeably in the case of couples who have completely died each other and unmarried siblings born of the same mother who haven't been influenced by anyone else's mana. Question, a previous fanbook depicted the magic tool used for color mixing. When the colors mix in a problematic way, do they repel each other and form a line? What would happen if Rosemine and Ferdinand, one a commoner with the devouring and the other the person who died her, used the tool? Answer, it's pretty rare for the tool to produce a complete line, but it would mean only a narrow portion of the mana is mixing together. In Rosemine and Ferdinand's case, it would look as though the entire screen had mixed together, and people would suspect they had already welcomed winter together. Oh god. They don't need that rumor going around. It was fortunate for them that this royal decree allowed them to skip the color mixing stage of an engagement as it preserved their reputations. Yes. Yes. Question, how are proposal face stones treated after a divorce? I'm curious whether they're returned to the person who made them or discarded. It depends on the individual. Some people would ask for the stone back since it would be uncomfortable signing the divorce papers while the other party has it. Others return it by choice, not wanting to keep anything that would remind them of their ex-partner. Still others might want to keep it as a memento if they separated because of family circumstances. Question. Rosemine didn't seem to notice that mana was leaking from the courtship magic tool that Prince Sigistwall gave her. Why was that? Could Hannelore see it? Answer. That's normal for a courtship magic tool. Nobody would see mana seeping out of it. Yeah, because it's supposed to get you used to the other person's mana. Question. It was said that a duchy's color corresponds to the color of the stone in their Bible book key. Since Arensbach's color has now changed, how will they change the color of the stone to match? Does it happen automatically once the duchy's color change is registered somewhere? If so, where does the registration take place? Answer. Registration takes place in the Royal Academy's registration hall. It's the same room used when changing the order of the doors to the dormitory and tea party rooms to match the duchy rankings. A duchy's color is changed by dyeing its registration face stone. Question. Registration brooches and duchy capes are given during the Feast of Beginnings, held right before new students join the Royal Academy. Is it acceptable to keep the brooches even after graduating? Answer. Yes, unless they leave the duchy for marriage or what have you. They might need to visit the Royal Academy when one of their children graduates for the Interduchy Tournament or for the Royal Archduke Conference. Question. When an ob is replaced, new registration brooches need to be brewed, but surely it's impossible to prepare enough for every noble in the duchy all at once. When are they brewed exactly? Answer. Depends on when the handover occurs, but they would prioritize making brooches for anyone about to go to the Royal Academy. For anyone else, it isn't particularly urgent. Authority is often passed within the bloodline so people can keep using the previous ob's brooches until the foundation has been fully dyed. It's even possible to delay the timing of re-dyeing the foundation a little. In the case of Trarqual, Sigistwald, and Rosemine, brooches will need to be made in a greater hurry for the nobles who need to attend the upcoming Archduke Conference. Question. When a noble dies, who gets ownership of their Royal Academy brooch? Is it sent back to the ob who made it in the first place? Or is it kept by the late noble's family as part of their estate? Answer. A recognition brooch is always returned to the ob whether its previous owner dies or simply leaves the duchy. It would pose a security risk otherwise, since a bad actor could use it to pose as a noble of the duchy it came from. Question. When a new ob rises to power, what happens to the brooches made by their predecessor? Are they used as materials for the new brooches? Answer. Since they can no longer be used, there are no particular rules about what to do with them. It depends on material scarcity at the time, and on the new ob's way of thinking. They might be collected or permission might be granted for them to be kept as mementos. Question. If someone loses their stat because their registration medal was destroyed while they were out of the duchy, can they obtain another by re-registering? Answer. No. The gods recognize a person by their first medal and only by their first medal. Okay. Question. Since becoming Schwarzenweiss's master requires both light and darkness, it seems that very few archnobles would qualify. Were the librarians who served as their master generally drawn for other branch royals or archducal family members? Answer. Yes, the Royal Academy Library is a very important facility after all. Question. Why are Schwartz and Weiss given new clothes whenever their master changes? Answer. Because wearing clothes infused with their new master's mana makes it easier for them to adjust to it. Question. Schwartz and Weiss seem to recognize people by their mana. Do they ever confuse Ferdinand for Rosemine and vice versa? Answer. Because they registered separately, they won't be mixed up when they're together. But if Rosemine's mana completely changed, as the result of a goddess, for example, the Shumails might mistake Ferdinand for her and start calling him Milady. I imagine he wouldn't be too thrilled on that. But he would deal with it, because he would know, that's not their fault. Question. Schwartz and Weiss can apparently identify people who have failed to return library books or who have taken them without permission. How? Is each book marked with a magic circle that functions as a tag of sorts, letting them see the length of the loan period and whether it was taken out properly? Answer. The books in the reading room are all registered with the library, so as is anyone who goes there. That's how they tell. Question. When a person becomes omni-elemental, Schwartz and Weiss stop saying that they lack elements, even if that person obtained the elements through the protection of subordinate gods. It seems a little premature, since having the protection of subordinate gods isn't enough to ascend the shrine. Why were they made to respond positively even when the person hasn't received protections from all the primary gods? Answer. Schwartz and Weiss were made to manage and monitor those who enter their room at the very back of the underground archive. The shrine is not relevant to that. Question. You have to hold Schwartz and Weiss's hands to take them out of the library. What would happen if you let go? Answer. If you aren't holding their hands when you leave the library, then they won't be able to pass through the doorway. Question. Hannelore must provide quite a lot of mana as a library committee member. Will Schwartz and Weiss ever guide her to the statue of Mestianor to give mana to Gramps? Answer. No, she isn't omni-elemental and Gramps is no longer in desperate need of mana. Question. Why do Schwartz and Weiss address Rosemine by her noble name when the gods call her mine? Was her noble name put on her medal, or do the shoe mills derive her name from the Foundation's registration face stone? Answer. Schwartz and Weiss use whatever name was registered with the library. The gods use the name associated with the person's first registered medal. Question. Did the Grutushite made by Absenti explain how to get the Milk of Mestianora and mention that the Duchy's foundation is connected to its temple bookroom? Answer. Absenti simply wanted to make her most beloved son the Zent, so she included no more information than was necessary to perform a Zent's duties. Back then, it was common knowledge that the Book of Mestianora was obtained through personal effort, so she saw no need to include extra steps on how to get something she knew her husband would never be able to acquire. The same is true for the magic tool Grutushite that Ferdinand made. He didn't include how to obtain the Book of Mestianora because he planned to make that common knowledge. It would have been a waste of papers. However, since it does include how to create a duchy, which is necessary for a Zent's duties, one can infer that the duchy's foundation and the temple are included. Question. What happened to the Grutushite at the very back of the underground archive? Will Troraquil or Stitchwall try to retrieve it after obtaining the necessary protections and becoming omni-elemental? Answer. One needs an omni-elemental staff to enter the big shrines, which rules Troraquil and Stitchwall out entirely. The Grutushite is sitting there untouched and will probably remain as such for quite a while. Question. What does Ferdinand plan to do with the Grutushite in the underground archive? Answer. Nothing. It's up to Zent Eglantine to decide what happens with it. Question. Does Eustace get to decide when to use the scolding shoe mill that Rosemine sent him? Answer. Yes. That's why it was sent to him and not Ferdinand. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to use it to force his lord to rest. Question. When Lansnov attacked, what happened to Letizia's shoe mill, the one that repeated messages from her parents? Answer. Either it was stolen or the face stone containing her parents' voices was gouged out. In any case, she doesn't have it anymore. Oh, that's sad. Poor Letizia. Question. Now that Rosemine is guaranteed to be moving to another duchy on account of becoming Ob Alexandria, what will happen to her guild card and all her savings? Answer. The cards that nobles use work in other duchies and in the sovereignty when they come in particularly handy, or where they become in particularly handy during Archduke conferences. If a commoner intended to move to another duchy, they needed to withdraw their money, then open a separate account with the guild in their new duchy. Question. Rosemine must be very disappointed that neither Trombes nor Peruse grow in Alexandria. Could she import them from Ehrenfest? Answer. Maybe, but she wouldn't. The fact that Trombes are used to make fey paper is a secret, and Peruse are one of the commoner's precious winter pleasures. They aren't something an Ob from another duchy should take away. Question. We know commoners catch fey fish, but what if they encountered a really destructive one they couldn't defeat on their own? Answer. The Knight's Order would deal with it just as they deal with Trombes too strong for commoners to defeat. Question. Can the fey fish, defeatable only by the Knight's Order, be eaten? Answer. Not all of them, but some can be. Question. In the third fan book, it was said that Lord of Winter appears in Ehrenfest and somewhere between Gillespiemeyer and Jossbrenner, while the Lord of Summer appears in Dunkelfelger. Is there only one Lord of Summer but two Lords of Winter because the people of Klassenburg spend the winter underground? I assume the fey beasts there get really strong since they aren't being hunted and eventually wander south. Answer. That's right. During winters in Klassenburg, where the land is rich with earth mana, Ewigalieb runs rampant. His subordinates grow in power before moving south to contain light and wind, and thus the Lords of Winter are born. Question. It was said that spring is delayed when the Lords of Winter aren't slain fast enough, but what if Ehrenfest and only Ehrenfest's Lord of Winter were slain unusually early? Would spring arrive at different times in East and West Jürgenschmidt? Answer. Yes, it would. Okay. Interesting. Question. In Part 1, Volume 1, it was said that Shoemill's eyes turn rainbow-colored when they're angry. They're weak fey beasts, so I doubt they have much mana, but could they be omni-elemental nonetheless? Or do their eyes only look rainbow-colored from the children's point of view? Answer. Shoemills aren't omni-elemental. As you guessed, their eyes only look rainbow-colored from the children's point of view. Even ordinary nobles can appear to have rainbow eyes when they get angry. I believe I used the same description for Lenore once. Think of it as quality of all living beings with mana. Question. When Mine was gathering, she seemed to pick up a lot of poisonous mushrooms. Was that because of her mana? Could some of it have leaked out and made the mushrooms poisonous? Answer. No, she simply lacked experience and an eye for gathering. Question, was the reason Kamio cried when he saw mine related to her mana, or was he just not used to her? Answer, he simply wasn't used to her. Also, because she was going to the temple and regularly using Rinsham, she smelled different from the rest of his family, which made him even more uneasy. Question, when Arano was reincarnated as mine, did she receive any special gifts, as it were? Answer, you could say that being reincarnated after wishing to read more books was a gift in itself. The gods didn't give her anything in particular. Okay, so she didn't get any cheat skills like all the other isekais do. Question, during the Trombe hunt in part 2, Ferdinand used mana repulsion to close Mine's wound. Did that die her at all, or does dying not occur when mana rebounds? Answer, his mana was foreign to her, so it naturally rebounded, but she still died a little. Even enough that the synchronization potion she drank later tasted sweet. Question, when did Mine learn to read Ferdinand's expressions? Personally, I think it was around the time of Spring Prayer in Part 2, Volume 3. Answer, that's much too soon. It was when she was stuck in the temple all winter when she had nobody else to lean on that she started making an effort to gauge his mood. She gradually became better at it, but she was still sometimes made mistakes. How much more do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Damn it! I might have to make this part 2! Oh my god. Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to make this 2-part because this is nuts.